How is electric vehicles useful in the future, and what should we gain knowledge about?
So electric vehicles are going to be one of the main um, vehicles that you see on the street. So it will have a significant market share going forward, because the thing is that they are obviously zero emission vehicles, but if you have electricity generation from more renewable sources, then the entire chain from fuel generation to fuel use, that entire thing becomes zero emissions. So which is why governments and even OEMs, the car manufacturers, are pushing for it. So they are definitely going to be useful in the future, and they are going to see an increased market share as well. So regarding the knowledge, I mean, from an engineering perspective, there is a lot of electrical engineering involved in that, because you have the high voltage capacity, high voltage battery, and you have the electric motors that you have to control. So using all of those things, you have the powertrain. So definitely there's a lot of electrical engineering involved in that. Apart from that, there's a lot of controls engineering, which involves creating control logic in MATLAB, Simulink, and after that, at a later stage, you also have a lot of calibration of the software that you create using MATLAB and Simulink.
We'll move on to the next question.
Yeah.
What are some of the control strategies used in HEVs? How should a beginner start learning about HEVs and its control strategy?
So the control strategies, there are mainly two control strategies that you can learn as a beginner. One is charge sustaining and charge depleting. So in a charge sustaining, what you do is that you have your battery at a certain state of charge. And so the control strategy tries to maintain the battery at that particular state of charge. And then if you have a charge depleting, so you would usually have a window of operation of that state of charge as, let's say, 80% state of charge to 30% state of charge. So you would operate within that window. So you once you hit the maximum threshold of 80% state of charge, you would start depleting the battery until you hit the minimum state of charge of 30%, and then you keep going from 30 to 80. And so you always operate within that window, and all the electric motor operation within that window helps the engine, and so that will help bring the emissions down. So how, if you want to start learning about the control strategies, then you can start by reading some research papers. If you go to Google Scholar, and if you just type control strategies for HEVs, or control strategies for even electric vehicles, any kind of control strategies that you want to learn, you can type this in Google Scholar. That will give you a lot of research papers that you can start reading, and then from there you can have some learnings.
What is the difference between engine's function when it starts from diesel or electricity?
Engines function when it starts from diesel or electricity. I'm not sure if I understand that question correctly.
So, I guess what they're asking is what is the difference between the difference between the engines will be for an for an electrically driven vehicle and a diesel driven vehicle.
The electric motor, you have like a motor that in many cases is directly inside the wheel, so it's called an in-wheel motor. And the engine, as you all know, is in front of the car most of the time. The difference in the characteristics of the engine is that the engine has high efficiency at higher load. So when you're driving it on highways at faster speeds, that's when your engine has the maximum efficiency. But when it comes to electric motors, they also give good torque and good efficiency at low speeds. So that is the major difference between engine and so most of the time, if you have a hybrid vehicle, when you start the car for the first time, your vehicle would usually start in electric mode, and then later on, as your vehicle's power demand increases because you're driving at higher speed, your engine comes on. So these kind of things happen.
What are some of the recent advancements in the field of HEV controls?
um, There are many research papers that talk about optimizing the control strategies based on the road terrain where you're driving and things like that. So if you are going up the hill or if you're going down the hill, so understanding those kind of scenarios, there are some control modifications. Those control modifications are obviously intellectual properties of all the companies that develop that. So I can't go into too much detail, but these are some of the things that researchers are looking into.
What is the scope of hybrid electric vehicles? Many companies are switching towards pure electric vehicles only. Based on cost effectiveness, will hybrid electric vehicle cost less compared to EV? What is the significance of hybrid electric vehicles when we have efficient electric vehicles? Is an extra engine a waste?
So yes, I totally agree with that. And the engines and hybrid electric vehicles are becoming a thing of the past. So that is the reason that many companies are switching towards pure electric vehicle, and now we have batteries that are also of very high capability, so that give very high power and they also give a long range, and that is the reason that many companies are switching to pure electric vehicles only. The hybrid electric vehicles were initially transient, so that the companies can meet the emissions target that all the governments around the world were setting. So they had to find an intermediate way of meeting those targets until electric vehicles, became efficient to that level. So that was just a step in between, and which is the reason everybody is moving to pure EV electric vehicles now. But hybrid electric vehicles can still be useful in areas where you don't have a lot of charging infrastructure. For example, in big cities where people live in multi-story flats and not everybody has a charging port nearby, and in on those kind of scenarios, I can see that hybrid electric vehicles with an engine will still be a good option. It will still be better than purely engine because the emissions will be lower in a hybrid electric vehicle. But at the long-term future is electric vehicle, pure electric vehicles.
What is the difference between hybrid and mild hybrid?
So in a hybrid, you have an electric motor that can also give power to the wheels. So you can have a pure electric driving mode where the engine is off, but you're driving the vehicle from only the electric power, and only when it is necessary the engine comes on to provide extra power. In a mild hybrid, the main driving component is the engine. You cannot drive the car without the engine on. And so you have a 48-volt system in the vehicle. The reason it was chosen as 48 volts because as a safety standard, 60 volt is considered, anything below 60 volt is considered safe, and anything above 60 volts needs to pass high voltage safety regulations and all sorts of things. So that's why, and mild hybrids is easy to construct from regular engine vehicle. It's easy to adapt for the OEMs. So you have like a generator kind of equipment which is called a belt integrated starter generator. So you have that in attached to the engine, so you can use that to charge the 48-volt battery. And if you go into any braking scenario or regeneration kind of scenario, you can use that to charge the 48-volt battery, which is a small battery, but that can support all your electricals in the car, like your AC, your music system, and things like that. So because currently in an engine, all of the load for these extra electrical components comes from the engine. So adding a mild hybrid reduces that consumption and thus increases the fuel economy.
What additional skill sets are required for HEV engineering compared to conventional automobile engineering?
Um, Definitely having some knowledge of electrical engineering related things and electrical components like the battery, the electric motor, and the inverter and the DC-DC converter. These are all the additional components that are part of the hybrid electric vehicle that are not present in the automotive, regular conventional automotive vehicles. So these are the skills. So, and also any automotive company now requires MATLAB Simulink skills because all the control strategies are built in that. But at the component level, you need to know about DC-DC converters, the batteries, inverters, and things like that.
How can all petrol vehicles be thrown out of the market suddenly? Will some source or will some kind of resource replace it?
Um, Petrol vehicles will not be thrown out of the market suddenly. It's just that their market share will be reduced eventually, and many countries, many smaller countries are thinking of removing engine vehicles, but there will be some variant of hybridization in the vehicles which will be in the market, especially in countries like India. They can't just be thrown out of the market suddenly. So slowly they will go towards hybridization, and at some market share there will be an electric vehicle, but they won't be thrown out. And there are many other resources in the sense that there are biofuels, and they are renewable sources of fuel, if you can say so. You can search and learn about biofuels which can be used to run the internal combustion engines. And if the manufacturers move towards that kind of technology, then you can still have the internal combustion engine with a renewable fuel.
How hybrid will work with electric vehicles and how EV will reduce their charging time?
um, how hybrid will work with electric vehicle in what sense? They are different vehicles. I don't know if I understand.
I'll move on to the next question.
Okay.
Which is a better and more sustainable option, electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell driven vehicles?
They are both good options, and um, I don't think it will be only one. They both will be present at different levels, because even currently, you have petrol, you have diesel, you have CNG engines, you have LPG. So it's not going to be only one single option that's going to go forward, and they are both going to be present. And whether they are which one is a more sustainable option, it depends purely on how these sources are derived. So for example, if you are generating electricity by burning a lot of coal, it doesn't make any difference because there's still going to be carbon emissions. Similarly, hydrogen, if you are creating hydrogen using natural gas, which is again like it's like a gas. So if you use that, then again it doesn't make difference. But if you use renewable electricity and you use hydrogen from renewable sources, then they are both green and sustainable options. And I think they both will have their own share in the market.
What will be the scope of electric vehicles in India as people here are much more into speed and robustness, while electric vehicles is a bit lower on in those aspects? How an electric vehicle can penetrate Indian markets? How can we appeal the industry in the field of electric vehicle? And how could we do courses in this field? There is no awareness among the rural areas.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions bunched into one. I'll go one by one in this.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when it
sure.
comes to speed, electric vehicles are faster than any internal combustion engine because of the torque characteristics that they have. You take an electric vehicle and you take a 6-cylinder or 8-cylinder engine, the speed of the electric vehicle can still be it can still be faster than those um, internal combustion engine. I have never seen any engine vehicle be as fast as the electric vehicle, so that part is covered. When it comes to robustness, they are getting more and more robust day by day. There is a lot of safety laws that are in place that make sure that these vehicles are safe to drive and they are robust enough to drive. But in a place like India, because I said about the accessibility of vehicle the charging stations, so that will definitely be a hindrance, and it will take time and it will take infrastructure to support the electric vehicles so that they can penetrate in the Indian market. And So until then, like hybrid electric vehicles can be a intermediate step that can definitely work in a place like India, and I can see that. And about courses, there are a lot of courses that you can do. You can learn about control systems. You can learn about modeling these vehicles in MATLAB Simulink. There are courses that are available that you can have a look at. And in the rural areas, it will take a lot of marketing and making people aware that there are options like hybrid vehicles and things like that. So it's a time consuming and time consuming process that will need a lot of effort from the government and the industry at the same time.
I need concept about grid electric vehicle. How the grid won't be disturbed when so many vehicles are charged simultaneously?
That is a very good question. So that is something that most of the countries' governments are also looking into, upgrading the grid so that the grid doesn't collapse when many vehicles are charged simultaneously. So at the current infrastructure, if everything changes overnight, then it's a problem for the grid. But obviously, not everybody overnight will have electric vehicles. So infrastructure development is important. If we are switching to electric vehicles, we need to have that electric infrastructure to support those electric vehicles charging. And many people would charge their electric vehicles during the night, and the grid is relatively less loaded during the night because all the offices, factories, and they are not always working. So at the moment, it is okay that way, but going in towards the future, the electric grid will need upgrading to support all of these electric vehicles.
How can you increase the battery life used in vehicles? Why is lithium ion battery used instead of vehicles? Used in vehicles? Why nickel cadmium battery is not used in vehicles? Electric vehicles are very profitable, but after a few days, even 1 year battery does not support. This problem will, we need to solve this problem. It is very important.
The battery life of the vehicle can be increased by having an intelligent battery management system. So you have a complete set of software that looks at all the voltages, cell voltages in the vehicle, and it tries to determine whether it is reaching its operational limits or not. And then the um, control strategy that runs the vehicle, they take into account, and they never exceed the battery's limits. And using these sorts of methods, you can increase the battery life of the vehicle. The lithium ion battery is used because it has a higher voltage. If you take one individual cell of a lithium ion, and if you take one individual cell of nickel cadmium, the lithium ion cell has a higher voltage compared to nickel cadmium, and that is why lithium ion is becoming more of a standard. So if you pack more cells in a vehicle, you get a higher voltage, and if you get a higher voltage, you get higher electrical power. And that is why lithium ion is, you can say, it's the future for the batteries, unless something else comes up. But as of now, that is why everybody is focusing on lithium ion batteries. The nickel cadmium battery, as I said, is has a lower voltage, but Toyota did use, I don't remember if it's nickel cadmium or nickel metal hydride, but they did use something like that, just other than lithium ion battery. And I think the previous companies, they used to use this sort of technology before lithium ion, but now I feel that going forward, this will eventually become obsolete. And the electric vehicles are profitable, but after a few days, even 1 year, battery does not support this problem. I don't know which problem this is, but the vehicles are quite robust, and they do have a good life.
I'll move into the next question.
Yeah.
Why hybrid vehicles are costly and when will it reduce like a normal automotive vehicle?
Okay, so the hybrid vehicles are costly because of the extra components that are in the vehicle, first of all, like the inverter, the battery, the electric motor, and DC-DC converter, those kind of things. And also, it is more complex to do the engineering part as well. If you want to make all of these components, which has in a conventional vehicle, you have an engine and a transmission, and that provides power. But if you have multiple components and if you have multiple torque sources, then you need to do some engineering, which is a lot more engineering to make all of them work together in an efficient manner, which is why it takes more cost with engineering plus components. And the cost will reduce, I believe, when there is some technology that makes these components cheaper, or you have more volume of the vehicles selling, so that volume will bring the production cost down, perhaps. And maybe that's how you can reduce the cost of the hybrid vehicles.
What type of motor and what type of battery should be suitable for a bike? Where should the motor be placed?
Uh, Motors, I believe you can use in-wheel motors. And battery pack, I'm not sure. I haven't looked much into bikes ran on battery, but there are um, some companies working. If you have like a scooter kind of thing, then under your seat you can have a battery pack. But if you have motorcycles, then perhaps where your engine is, if you have some different structure of the battery, you can probably place it there.
I think FCEVs have so many advantages over BEVs. Why we don't have to mine for materials like lithium, etc. Also, FCEVs refuel much faster and seem to be capable of offering much longer ranges. With all these great plus points, why have car companies shown so little interest to FCEVs in compared to BEVs? Why hasn't the government of any country made massive investments towards expanding hydrogen fuel infrastructure?
Uh, yes, that is a correct statement that there are advantages of fuel cell electric vehicles. But if you think about passenger cars, then the battery electric vehicle's entire life cycle is more efficient. So the way electricity is generated, if you use green electricity through renewable sources and then you charge your vehicles directly uh, through that renewable electricity, and you just have to use the electricity directly in your electric motors. But when it comes to fuel cell electric vehicles, you first have to use some methods to produce hydrogen, then you transport hydrogen, then you pump hydrogen, and you convert hydrogen back to electricity, and then you use that electricity then to charge the lithium to run your electric motor. So overall you have some efficiency losses in fuel cell electric vehicle compared to a battery electric vehicle. But having said that, it has many advantages, like it says over here that it can refuel quickly and it can have a good long range as well. So there are companies that are definitely uh, manufacturing fuel cell electric vehicles. There are some production level vehicles by Toyota, Hyundai, and I think going forward there will be more that you can see. And fuel cell electric vehicles are gaining more attention in like trucks and heavier vehicles. So definitely we can expect to see more investment in buses and trucks that are being run by hydrogen fuel cell. And it's not limited to that. Even trains and other big um, vehicles, you can say, are also going to be powered by fuel cell in the future. And it will take investment to expand the hydrogen fuel structure. It will also take investment to expand the charging infrastructure. So there is no way around developing that infrastructure. It has to happen one way or another.
Will hybrid electric vehicle work well in India, being costlier for the middle class market? How can we overcome power point stations for EV in India?
Hybrid vehicles, they can be effective. Middle class maybe not, but they, if somebody wants to go for a little bit of higher, then they can buy these vehicles. Uh, Going forward, if the cost of some components come down, and if in that case, then it can slightly be a bit more affordable. And also, mild hybrids can be a good starting point, and then from mild hybrids, then we can go more towards hybrid electric vehicles, because mild hybrids are cheaper. They are slightly expensive than conventional vehicles, but they are still a lot cheaper than uh, the hybrid electric vehicles, because they have smaller batteries and smaller component sizes, so the additional cost is not huge, so it can still be affordable in the Indian market.
Which is better to control pollution, hybrid or fully electric vehicle?
Um, Definitely, fully electric vehicles are zero emission vehicles, but like I've spoken before, it also depends where the electricity is coming from. So if that electricity source is somewhat better than just pure coal or something like that, then fully electric vehicles are much better. But having said that, no country is currently working on 100% renewable energy. They all have different fuel sources that they use to produce electricity. But even considering that, overall, the fully electric vehicles are much better when it comes to pollution, and the hybrid vehicles, they still have pollution, and it's only transient step, like I said, because going forward, the laws for pollution are going to be even more and more strict, and so you can't really meet all of those regulations just by a hybrid vehicle. You need to go towards electric vehicles in the future.
Nowadays, people are working for EVs at particular locations like battery of EV and charging of EV. What is the high efficient battery for EVs? Why? Which charger is suitable to EV and why? Which converter is used in that battery? Why don't we think about solar electric vehicles?
Um, Solar electric vehicles, solar will never be able to charge the EVs at the rate at which the electricity is being consumed. So you can have that as an additional feature, but it will never be sufficient. You can't just always use EVs. If you are going on a 400, 300 kilometer long drive and you're driving continuously, the solar will never be able to charge it in such a way that you sustain that drive. You need to park it for a long period of time so that you get some solar charging. And which charger is suitable? So there are companies that gives chargers, and there are charging ports that are developed by many companies, and they have their own standards, and even charging stations directed by the regulations have their own standards. So that's why, based on the vehicle and the charging manufacturer of the charging station in the country you are in, you will have a certain kind of chargers. And location wise, so battery I think what it's meant here is battery of EV. So batteries are manufactured in certain locations, that's true, because that depends on where the resources are available. And the charging of EV is a global thing, so many companies will work on charging stations, and I think it's not limited to locations. I think it's definitely going to be spread out in many places.
And what is the high efficient battery for EV?
What is high efficiency? In the sense, the batteries are quite efficient. I don't know the exact number for the efficiency, but lithium ion batteries are considered quite efficient.
Can you explain about charging capacity and also assume if the electric vehicle is moving in a hill suddenly, it gets turned off. After that, will it move with the same efficiency as a diesel engine or does it change?
Can you change the charge? So electric vehicle charging capacity depends on the state of charge of the battery. And if you are moving in a hill, so there are two scenarios: if you're going up the hill or if you're going down the hill. If you're going down the hill, then the electric motor goes into a regeneration mode. So the electric motor essentially turns into a generator, and it will charge the battery in that scenario. So you are recuperating all of that energy through charging the battery, because your electric motor can also turn into a generator and produce electricity to charge the battery when you're going down a hill. When you're going up a hill, it has to provide torque, so it will work as usual by providing the torque necessary to push the vehicle forward.
Can you beat the EPA mileage estimates with hybrid electric vehicles?
The EPA mileages are what's tested and that's what's certified. The real world may be a little bit less, but it's not completely different from what is the certification is. There are cases where um, because the thing is that when you are driving, it depends on many factors. If you have the air conditioning on for a long time, and an electric vehicle, that comes from the battery, so it reduces your driving range a little bit. And so the certification mileages are somewhat of a guidance, maybe you can say. And so hybrid electric vehicles are more likely to meet the EPA mileage certification because they have the engine in that as well. So I, yeah, I think I'm not sure if the question is whether we can exceed the EPA mileage, but I imagine not, because otherwise the EPA certification would be for that higher value.
Why don't we try other than batteries for hybrid electric vehicles such as supercapacitors or battery combined with supercapacitor, or by employing energy harvesting methods in need of emergency? Many electric vehicles have one problem. After some time, the battery has discharged. They have, and okay. How to remove the battery and improve a new model without a battery?
So yeah, supercapacitors are also promising, but the supercapacitors have very low energy density, meaning they will not provide you the long range that you need for to drive for a long distance. You need energy, and supercapacitors are good for providing instantaneous power. So if it will improve your acceleration um, if you have a supercapacitor, but it will never improve your range. And when it comes to combining the battery with supercapacitors, I believe there have been some studies, but I'm not sure why it has not happened. Perhaps it's a bit of a complication, but I've read some articles where it says that there are batteries that combine multiple chemistry cells. So you usually, if you have a lithium ion battery, it's the same chemistry of the battery in the whole battery pack, but I believe there are some research that's going on into mm, improving the power capacity of the battery pack itself. So supercapacitors will, in that scenario, will not necessarily be needed, maybe, because the only advantage supercapacitors provide is a higher power, and if the batteries can through some method or some chemistry modification achieve that higher power, then supercapacitors may not really be necessary. And by energy harvesting in methods of need, I think if it is talking about using the battery electricity going back into the grid, then that is possible. You can connect your vehicle to the electricity grid, and you can power the grid, and you can maybe power your house if it has enough power. But if that is the question, I'm not sure. But the batteries discharge after some time. If it depends on the battery, yes, it depends on the packaging. And as the battery research is advancing, the self discharge of the battery, which is the battery discharging after some time, that is reducing day by day. So that is um, that it has to be unused for a very long period of time for the battery to do some self discharge. If it's only 1 hour or overnight or one or 2 days, then the battery self discharge is basically negligible. And how to remove the battery and improve a new model without battery, um, I don't know that question, if I understand the question correctly. If you remove the model, then it becomes you need either an engine or some other power source. But uh, so
Does an electric car achieve zero emission? Is it more expensive than a conventional car? What kind of electric cars are there? How do they compare? And how much does it cost to charge at the charging station? Electric car, how often do you have to replace the battery?
The electric car, the car itself is zero emission, yes. It is more expensive than conventional cars because the battery packs cost is higher in current market because of the technology and the mining of the lithium involved in that. So they are quite expensive, but the cost is coming down, and they're in the near future. There are some models that are slightly more expensive than the conventional vehicles, but there are models that are very expensive than conventional cars. So I in currently and in the future there will be electric car models that are in all price ranges. So it should be compare. It should maybe slightly higher, but still relatively comparable. And regarding the cost to charge at charging stations, it depends on the charging station. It depends on the country. It depends on the cost of electricity. So there are many variables involved in that. So there isn't one single answer. It totally depends where you are, where you're charging, and all those sorts of things. You don't have to replace the battery for a very long time, at least 8 to 10 years for sure.
There's one more question along the same line in the chat box. So it is from Niraj, and he's asking what will the cost be if we want to replace a battery?
That depends on the battery type, depends on the manufacturer. So I don't know what exactly the cost is going to be. It depends on many factors.
So next we'll move on to some job-oriented questions. What are the job opportunities in this field for a fresher, and how to get a job in this field being a fresher?
So in India, you can you can start in like controls department perhaps. So you can start by learning about electric vehicles. You can start by learning about control methods. Like you can start control methods. Maybe it's a bit difficult, but you can start by having some expertise in MATLAB Simulink model development. So that is a very good skill to have, and even conventional automotive development has that skill needed. So you can start by that, and you can um, there are many resources online that show how to build a vehicle model and these kind of things. So you can start by developing those models, which can become a part of your portfolio, that can go on your resume, that shows that it's more than bookish knowledge. You've developed some practical MATLAB models, you've done some practical work. So that's a good way to start.
What are the leading HEV manufacturing companies in India? What are the top typical skills needed to apply for any HEV engineer? Which is more dominating in the basis of scope among CFE, FEA, and MBA in the field of HEV?
So all of these skills like CFD, FEA, they are definitely still useful in uh, developing hybrid electric vehicles, because you have to model a lot of heat and air and those kind of things. And so all of these skills are definitely still needed in the field of electric vehicle and hybrid electric vehicle development. And if you have these skills, then yeah, it's a good thing. um, in India, there are companies, I believe Tata and Mahindra, and even some, I'm not sure, but maybe Ashok Leyland was also trying to do some sort of electrical integration into their vehicles. So um, yeah, you can look at the company profile of these companies and see if they are into developing any of these electric vehicles. There are some mild hybrids in the market already, but I think there will be more development. So definitely look OEMs, and apart from OEMs, there are other companies like maybe Bosch and these kind of supporting companies that you can have a look at.
How can a design engineer grow a career in HEV sector?
So for a design engineer, there is a lot of, I believe it's talking about like 3D model designing. So if that is the question, then there is a lot of packaging related work in hybrid electricals because you have so many components, and in all of these you have to fit all of these components in the car. So there's a lot of design related activities that um, try to see how you can design the internal structure of the vehicle so you can fit all of these components and make it make the packaging space efficiently used and these kind of things.
Please tell us about electric vehicle courses after diploma in mechanical engineering or electrical engineering.
Uh, I believe Skill-Lync has some good courses when it comes to these kind of topics. Apart from that, there's a lot of resources. If you just try to search for courses, there will be a lot.
How will be the scope of a person having interest in CFD in electric vehicle industry, and how to upskill myself for my undergraduation in order to survive in that domain? What topics and softwares do I have to focus on? We'll finish that and move on to the next part.
Okay, so I'm not a CFD engineer, but CFD and CFD work is definitely happening in electric vehicle. I mean, any kind of vehicle, whether it is electric, hybrid, fuel cell, CFD is always important. So when it comes to softwares, because I am not in that domain, I am not very aware of the softwares. But what I've heard is like ANSYS and these kind of softwares are used. So uh, I would say that if you want to increase your skill, have some projects apart from your regular college coursework. So if you have more projects that you can show, that will give you a bit of extra edge. And if you sit in an interview, if you talk about these projects with confidence, then the interviewer will be able to see that okay, you have done more work and you understand what you have done. So and that applies to not just CFD, to anything. Even if you are trying to get into controls, then you can develop some models or some projects in MATLAB, and you can showcase those projects so that it's more than just bookish and college education, because everybody has that. So if you want to do more, then you can do it in these manners. How broadly this have enters into our life.
So I think the next question is, will HEVs be limited to automobile industry or will it be implemented in space research?
uh, I don't know. Batteries, the thing is that the batteries in cold temperatures, they don't really perform very well. But having said that, there can be mechanisms to warm it up and use it. But I believe for space, they have other technologies already. So I don't think, I'm not sure whether the space research will actually implement these sorts of things.
I believe there's some sort of disturbance. Can you just tell me if we are audible? Like, can you say yes in the chat box if we are audible? Okay. We'll just go forward. I have completed battery management system course and I am interested in electric vehicles. What are the job opportunities or chances that I would get as a fresher in these domains?
So battery management, if there are companies that are involved in battery management, I'm not 100% sure about whether how much battery management work is being done in India, but it is um, at the moment it is very limited to the battery manufacturers and battery and electric vehicles manufacturer. But if, the job would be that if you work for an or a OEM like Mahindra or Tata, those companies, if they are trying to source a battery from some manufacturer, they will have an engineer from their side who will tell the battery manufacturer that these are the kind of characteristics that we're looking for in the battery, and these are the things that we want to achieve. So um, through that you can have some job opportunities in vehicle manufacturers and even technology providers. So you have to just look for, you should not limit your search to vehicle manufacturers. There are many other supporting companies like Bosch, AVL, and these kind of companies. So many times these companies do work that vehicle manufacturers do not always do, because they are focused on producing a vehicle. They not always work on technologies. So yeah, you can expand your searches in this sense and try to look for some job opportunities there. As a domain, as a fresher, again, I think the same applies, that if you've done some battery management system course, then you would have learned about some battery management algorithms, about how to estimate the state of charge or estimate the state of health using various methods like the open circuit voltage or current and these kind of things. And if you can, if you want to stand out, then you can have some um, MATLAB models that show these battery management algorithms, and that can give you a bit of an edge.
What are the future growth opportunities of HEV in India?
Um, so Indian government is definitely pushing for more hybrids and electric vehicle growth. So there will be more hybrid electric vehicles that you see in India, and more companies, even from outside, like Toyota, would probably be coming to India with hybrid electric vehicles. And when that happens, the Indian manufacturers will also have to bring their own models with hybrid electric vehicles. Tata already has an all electric car, and they are already developing these technologies, and they have some production ready vehicles. So definitely we are not going back into developing more and more diesel and petrol engines. So going forward, there will be new technologies. So definitely, hybrid electric vehicles will grow in India.
So I think we've covered almost all the questions. We have a few more in the chat box, and I've been noticing that it's more of a discussion. People have been answering each other's questions. So I'll just pick and choose a few. Where will you dispose old hybrid electric vehicles, or can such vehicles be recycled?
Hybrid electric vehicles, you can recycle. You can recycle the batteries. If you take the battery and you can use the material used in those batteries, like lithium, manganese, cobalt, and all these kind of materials that are used. So you can recycle the batteries and all the other components as well, like they are whatever metal they are made of. You can use the metals, and you can definitely recycle it. And that is battery recycling is an upcoming industry, if you want to think it that way. So they will take your batteries, lithium and batteries, and then recycle the lithium out of it and other components. So apart from lithium, there are other rare metals like manganese, cobalt, and these kind of metals, and they are all quite useful. um, so yeah, you can recycle those materials.
There's a question from Bhuvanesh. Can hybrid electric vehicles work properly in severe temperatures, like in deserts or in rainy areas? Or will they be dangerous in these places?
Hybrid vehicles, hybrid and electric, or just electric? Can you repeat the question?
Hybrid vehicles is what he's
Yeah,
asking.
hybrid vehicles, they can work in all kind of scenarios. They When it comes to rainy and these kind of weather, there is a lot of electrical safety certification. So the vehicles are tested for safe electrical system in the vehicle before they are launched into the market. And without those certifications of being safe, they won't be in the market. So that is not an issue. And for any extreme weather like cold climate or even hot weather, there are mechanisms in place that if it's the battery, if it's really cold, then after a bbit of a usage it warms up on its own. But you can have other mechanisms in the vehicle to warm it up as well. But with in a few minutes of operation, the battery warms itself up anyway. And if the battery gets too hot in a desert like climate, you can have some cooling around it to keep it cool and still keep using it.
Okay, there's a job related question. So, should I join in startup companies or recognized manufacturing companies? If so, what do the industries expect from an electrical engineer?
Joining a startup or or a already big manufacturer is quite a personal choice. It depends on what do you want to do. Basically, it's I would personally prefer to have some experience in a startup because it gives you more exposure, but it's a very personal preference. You can working in a established company, you have more technologies around maybe, and you can see that a lot of multiple projects would be happening, so you will be probably exposed to a bit more technology maybe, but it's a very personal choice to make. And electrical engineering, like I said, that because the battery and all of these components are all electrical components, so electrical engineering is definitely important in these vehicle developments.
There is a question from Raj Kumar. What is the area of work going related to the noise in electric vehicles? Is there noise absorption panels?
Can you repeat the question?
One second. What is the area of work going related to noise in electric vehicles? Are there any noise absorption panels?
Noise, electric vehicles are, they don't really make much noise like the engines do, so there isn't much in that sector, I would say.
Okay. What is the charging time to charge vehicle to full battery?
The charging time to charge the vehicle depends on many factors. Again, it depends on how much, there are different levels of chargers. So, and there is AC charging and there is DC charging. DC charging is the fastest, and AC charging, it depends on what kilowatt hour your rating of the charger is. So based on that, um, you can determine, but there's no fixed value of how much it will take to charge. It depends on how depleted your battery is, how big your battery is. So there are all of, considering all of these parameters, if you have a DC charging, it can take 1 hour maybe, and if you have very like low power charging, it can take maybe 8 to 10 hours.
And along with that, how much time like can a battery last after charging for a single time?
After charging for a single time, it if you charge it fully, then your vehicle manufacturer gives a mileage rating that on a full charge it can drive a certain kilometers or certain miles. So that's how it is technically supposed to last. But there are some variations about how much air conditioning you're using and these kind of things. But that is factored in a little bit when the certification is given for the mileage rating. But there you can expect to see a little bit of variation, but roughly. So for example, if Tesla says that on one full charge you can drive 300 miles, then you can expect somewhat in that proximity to have the vehicle range.
I think we've covered almost all the questions. I'll just check. So, will there be a power drop when going above sea level in HEVs?
Going above sea level, the batteries don't really make a difference because the thing that matters to the battery is the temperature. It's not the um, altitude. So if the temperature is maintained in its optimum operating region, then it's okay. It's not a big deal.
Okay. As a mechanical fresher, how can we get into the field of model based development? Or MIL, SIL, or HIL?
So HIL is hardware in the loop, so you need hardware, which is what usually companies have. So you can learn about it, but you can't really perform HIL in your house. You can do model in the loop, which is you can develop models, and you can just have some sort of closed loop and test that. There are a lot of tutorials that you can look at and try to learn that, and I would advise that it's a very good skill to have. And if you have even one or two good projects that show these model development and model in loop, then it's a very very good skill to put on your CV. You can have, there are a lot of resources. I don't know if Skill-Lync has, but there are a lot of resources on even MATLAB's, because model in loop and all that is MATLAB's thing. So you can look at MATLAB's resources as well.
We'll go through one last question.
Okay.
So, can we charge our electric vehicles with our home electrical arrangements, or do we need a charging grid?
You can charge with your home. Um, I'm not sure. The thing is that if you charge it with your home, I think it should be possible, but it is going to take a lot of time to charge. But there are people who charge their vehicles at their home, so yeah, it is possible.